Today, I'm going to share with you how to program your mind and achieve your goals. This is a fairly long training, and as you know, I don't like the episodes to go too much over 20 minutes because my listeners are busy. You've got things going on in your life. So what I've decided to do is today I'm going to dive into the first element of it, the concepts behind programming your mind, why it matters, how to understand your brain, the difference between your conscious and your subconscious mind, as well as understanding your mind and how that impacts beliefs, as well as how you deal with challenges and what's possible. And then we're going to conclude with how to slow down and quiet your mind so that you can rewire your subconscious. It's a lot of material. I don't want to overwhelm you with the other 6 steps because this in and of itself is plenty of work for you to dive into today and then start working on until next week, where we'll dive into the next section where we dive into focus, how to decide and get really clear, how to incorporate your worth barometer, releasing mental blocks and core beliefs, programming your mind, the steps to do it, and tips, as well as the Power 7. So let's dive in.
Hi, I'm Annette Ba'u, host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast and founder of the Millionaire Insider. My mission is to help you simplify the money game so you can create a financially secure and fulfilled life without having to have a PhD or spend countless hours on your finances. You're going to learn how to think like a millionaire, stop worrying about money and wondering if your financial house is truly in order, and instead spend your time doing what you love. With over 3 decades advising 7, 8, and even 9-figure millionaires, and now joining that elite group, I'm in a unique position to help you make the best financial choices so you can create a secure financial future and retirement you love. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast.
Today's free resource is our estate planning checklist. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/EPC. The estate planning checklist is so critical because it's there to help you go through a checklist to determine what do you need to do, what have you done, where are there gaps, and more importantly, what is your next best step. Regardless of where you are in your planning stages, this checklist is so important. Again, you can access it at themillionaireinsider.com/EPC. You know, most of us have a clear idea of how we want our assets distributed, who would get them, who will manage them, all those things. And your estate plan is what makes sure that comes to fruition. So I encourage you to download this guide. You can access it at themillionaireinsider.com/EPC. All materials, forms, and intellectual property are copywritten by themillionaireseries.com. The information we provide is not intended to replace any advisor or specialist or to provide you any financial, tax, retirement, or any planning or healthcare advice. All participants agree to hold millionaireseries.com and its affiliates harmless for results achieved or not achieved, and all international copyrights are reserved. For today's show notes, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/101. So I want to welcome you to how to program your mind and achieve your goals. You know, one of the things I want to ask you is, do you ever feel stuck or that you're not making as much progress as you want? Or maybe you want more success, more money, better relationships, more revenue, or something like losing weight. You know, my entire life has been in search of the secret of success. And I will say that programming your mind is possibly the most important aspect of that. Why does programming your mind matter? As Dr. Bruce Lipton, former faculty of Stanford University Medical Center, shared, most people don't even know that their subconscious mind is at play, when the fact is it is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the conscious mind, and that we operate 95 to 99% of our lives from subconscious programs. The first thing you got to do, my friends, is to program your mind. And that requires that you understand how the brain and the mind work. So let's look at understanding the brain. And I want to start just with an overview as far as a history of the brain. Hopefully by now you know that we have an old brain. It's that primal toddler child. I refer to it as the limbic brain, but it's really part of the limbic system. And the reason I call it limbic brain is because that's how it acts. It's just out of control if you don't rein it in. It involves several areas near the edge of the cortex concerned with instinct and mood. And it controls the basic emotions, fear, pleasure, anger, and it drives hunger, sex, a lot of things as far as how we show up. It's also where the fight or flight resides, and for many people, it runs their life. It wants instant gratification, and it controls, as Bruce Lipton shared, up to 98% of what you do or don't do. I mean, if you think of a toddler or a child not getting their way, what happens? They throw a fit. If they're hungry on top of it, it's even a worse fit. The issue is our brains can be addicted to dopamine and serotonin. A lot of those feel-good drugs, which are really chemicals in our brain. But what's so fascinating is that when we crave things like junk food or alcohol or really any type of food, and we have an addiction, it's because we want to have those dopamine hits and we want to feel good. The issue is that is all controlled by our primal brain. It's also there to keep us safe. It doesn't want things to change. It wants to conserve calories. The unknown is really scary because it's unpredictable and it could be dangerous. I mean, what if a tiger attacked you? What if you starved to death? What's so interesting is that people who have an out of control primal brain are constantly at odds, meaning they're trying to do what they need to do, but then they don't. And then they have justification or rationalization of why they don't do it. It is just fascinating for someone who has been obsessed with the brain and why some people perform and others don't. Our prefrontal cortex is referred to as our adult brain, and it's believed that it takes about 25 to 26 years to develop. Now, having spent 40 years researching millionaires and super successful people, I can assure you that not everyone's prefrontal cortex is developed. But it's much more evolved as far as our part of our brain, and it's something that only humans have. It allows us to create a plan, to delay gratification, and to make decisions for our best self in the future. Our prefrontal cortex knows that we need to save money for retirement, but our primal brain wants those dopamine hits that we get from buying that latte or the new purse or makeup. Same thing in our business. Our prefrontal cortex knows we need to make our calls. It knows we need to meet new people. But that child primal brain wants us to have fun now. It doesn't want us to be uncomfortable. And then it will help us to rationalize or justify our decision, why we did it or why we didn't do it. The best news of all is that we're all capable of rewiring our brain and replacing those hardwired neural pathways known as habits that aren't serving us, if we're willing to do the work. So let's look at the conscious versus the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is much more creative as compared to the subconscious mind, which is much more habitual, driven by habits and emotions. The subconscious mind is like a computer. It's right here, right now. If you have a virus in it, it's a serious problem. I mean, think about if you had a virus in your computer or you were missing a file, you would have serious problems. And yet, somehow, people don't equate that to their mind. We've got to have our subconscious mind and our conscious mind aligned, but we also have to be able to pause when something happens that we feel nervous about or that we are not sure of. And you can just watch people that just respond reactively. They say what's on their mind as compared to being able to push the pause button. That's a perfect example of someone who has an out of control primal brain, and they don't have a developed prefrontal cortex. The conscious mind drives volition and willpower. It can judge and set goals. The reason it's so critical to get your conscious and subconscious mind in alignment is because if your subconscious mind and conscious mind aren't in alignment, what you'll find is that it's virtually impossible to achieve a goal. You've got to get that subconscious mind on board. Now, one of the most important things to do is to program your mind during the alpha state, right when you go to bed or right when you wake up. Why that's so important is because that's when the subconscious mind is the most open. And so if we want to be able to make a change that we're scared about or we're uncertain about, that's the time to do it, because that's when you can program it and it's not fighting you. So it's really important to get. The subconscious mind has a lot of other functions too, like motor functions, heart rate, digestion, things that happen without us thinking about them. And as I mentioned, it wants to conserve energy and calories and keep us alive, protect us, and it wants to play it safe. So when you have some major crazy goal, it's going to do everything in its power to say, that's crazy, you can never achieve it, why would you want to? Now, the conscious mind, on the other hand, thinks in abstract terms, and it's more conceptually based. You come up with a great idea of what you're going to do, and you're super excited about it, and then the subconscious mind kicks in and says, who are you? How do you think you can achieve that? The subconscious thinks literally through our senses, and it's much more memory-based as compared to the conscious mind, which is much more time-bound. It can see the past, the present, and the future. Setting a future-based goal in the present can appear to be crazy from your conscious mind, meaning you set this crazy goal and you're like, oh my gosh, but your conscious mind knows what you want and it says, let's go for it. And then it's that subconscious mind that comes in and says, wait a minute, that's not realistic. You can't do that. The subconscious mind is timeless. It's got only present time as far as being able to know the difference between the past and the present and the future. Now, one thing that's really powerful is the subconscious mind can't tell the difference between what is reality and what's visualized. So it can be really powerful if you can tap into visualization as one of your techniques. When you set a goal in the future and you've got this great plan, if the subconscious mind and conscious mind are not in alignment, it's not going to happen because the subconscious mind is right here, right now. If it's not programmed to believe it, you're not going to be able to achieve it. So how do we program it? I mean, that's probably one of the most important things you got to identify is how do you program it? Because if you can program it, then you're going to start seeing results. And as I mentioned to begin with, I cannot tell you how many people get on these calls that are, if I have a call on lead generation, I have a call on selling, I have a call on anything related affluent clients, oh my gosh, you get everyone and their brothers on the calls. But when I start talking about things that require internal changes, oh, it's like our numbers are so much lower. And I find it fascinating. And I think all of you guys that are on, I just commend you because it's so funny, because it's like, it's not my job to go and try to convince someone. It's like, oh, you're struggling? Well, let's see what happens in a year from now. And all we do is track numbers. We're always looking at how is a person showing up. If you are working on your inner game combined with your outer game and your game plan, that is the magical formula. Most people want to breeze over their game plan and then focus just on the outer game. And then they wonder why they're struggling. Understanding your mind. Challenges and problems need beliefs that support them. They also need focus and energy. How we look at the situation is up to us. And the first step is we've got to program or reprogram our mind. And as I just mentioned, if you have a computer that's missing a file or it has a virus, you know that you've got to either load the file or remove the virus, or the computer is not going to work. Well, the same's true of our minds. Some of the files, which are beliefs that we have in our mind, are serving us, and others aren't. And that's why we're either achieving our goal or not. When we have a corrupt file that needs to be replaced with beliefs and behaviors that support our goal, if the subconscious mind is not on board, it's very difficult. And that's why learning how to reprogram your mind through visualization, through getting into that alpha state, through goal setting, through affirmative statements, all those things are so critical. And it's something that if you're having challenge with it, I guarantee you just need to spend more time on it. You need to calm down your mind, go slower versus speeding up. Programming your mind, the first step is to slow down your thinking. It takes 66 days on average to change a habit, between 18 and 254 days. Breathing slows us down and it allows us to get into the state of being right here, right now, and getting clear on where we are and where we want to go. It allows us to set our intention and to tap into our intuition and inner guidance. One of the things that's absolutely critical in doing that is to get adequate sleep, 7 to 8.5 hours of sleep per night, knowing that 60 to 90 minutes of our sleep time, we are awake. So you've got to add that to it, meaning if you're going to bed at 10 p.m., you're getting up at 6, you're only getting between 6.5 and 7.5 hours of sleep a night. Got to be aware of that. We also don't want stimulation 60 to 90 minutes before we go to bed, and that includes TV, cell phones, news, computer, books or movies that stimulate our nervous system. That's the best time to be doing your visualization, positive prayer, focusing in on what you want, yoga, silent meditation, all those things. Ideally, you want to be able to wake up without an alarm clock, so you're waking up once you've had adequate sleep. One of the best resources for understanding your mind is The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. You can find it at themillionaireinsider.com/subconscious mind. And I'll say that again. You can find that at themillionaireinsider.com/subconscious mind. So our right brain is much more emotion-based. Our left brain is much more logical and rational. So the next thing we got to do, as we talked about, is slow down our mind. We've got to get in the driver's seat, and that requires that we slow down, quiet our mind and thinking so we can become present, conscious, and focused. This allows us to set our intention and tap into our intuition and inner guidance. It also allows us to reduce stress and pressure and increase our reserves so we have more than we need in the area of time, money, energy, etc. Our high-value activities and income-producing activities need to become habits, just like brushing our teeth or wearing shoes. Most people would not put one shoe on and then leave to go to the office. And that's what I'm talking about. The problem is that you think, oh, I can get away with it, or oh, I can just overdo it in this area. It doesn't work. All right, slowing down and quieting your mind. It starts with your thoughts. What are you thinking? Then, what are you saying? What are your actions and what are your results? Those are the areas you got to look at. And if you're saying, oh my gosh, I've got great thoughts, my words are great, my actions are great, I'm getting amazing results, then you're good to go. Unfortunately, most people, that's not the case. It requires that you become and remain present, conscious, focused, and accountable. You want to continue to monitor and refocus on what you want. And you want to determine when are you at your best. This requires that you get comfortable being uncomfortable, as this allows you to train your primal brain. Now, I've talked a lot about the fact that I have literally lost almost 10 pounds, like 8 pounds. My intention wasn't to lose weight. I mean, yeah, I love the fact that I weigh what I weighed in my 20s and that I feel healthier than I've ever felt. It was more the fact of getting in control of when I'm hungry, eating, and when I'm not hungry, not eating, and namely my blood sugar. So I got to the point where I was pre-diabetic. You know, every doctor's like, oh, you're fine. I'm like, I'm not fine. I'm like right on the border of pre-diabetic. They're like, oh, didn't notice that. I'm thinking that is just terrifying. And I've gone from like a 5.7 A1C to it was a 5.3, and I bet now it's probably a 5.0 because I do continual monitoring and my blood sugar is absolutely perfect. It's amazing. Now, sometimes it drops, sometimes it goes high, but that can happen. But for the most part, it's really, really good. Well, what that has required me to have to do is to get uncomfortable when I'm hungry. I fast from 6 p.m. until 10 a.m., and then I eat, and then I fast until I eat again at dinner. Well, what would happen is at about 3 o'clock, I get hungry. And I had all these crazy thoughts going through my mind of, you could starve to death. You're not going to be able to finish the day strong. You've got to eat. I mean, aren't we taught that as a kid? We've got to eat. And it's so fascinating that my coach is like, you don't do anything when you get into that state. You sit in it. You've got to learn how to embody and manage your emotions. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, because see, as far as when it comes to business, I've never really had that issue. Like I've never had that issue of needing to do something and I don't do it. I do it. Like I am like really good. I've always been really disciplined in that area. So it's not the same. But this area, especially, I find like myself eating when I'm not even hungry because it's kind of like we do things to avoid the emotion, what we're experiencing. And just sitting in that. Now, I manifest very quickly. It took me about 2 weeks. And I will tell you, it was so hard. And now it's kind of like, I look forward to it. I'm like, oh, it's so interesting when thoughts pop up. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because right now, all right, it's 1:20 and I do feel a little bit hungry. But I won't eat until around somewhere between 4 and 5. It depends on the day. I don't eat there. And I don't have any problem with it. But see, the reason I bring up that scenario is because it's the same process as what you have to do in your business. It's the same process of what you have to do with your money. One of the things that I find so interesting is that people don't want to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That is completely driven by our primal brain. And the funny thing about it is that when we can get comfortable being uncomfortable, we're going to show up so differently and we're going to do what we need to do. What do most people do when they're stressed out? They either spend money or they eat what they shouldn't eat. And what ends up happening is they're eating sugar, they're eating flour, they're eating processed foods, and it's just a vicious cycle. And then they gain weight, they feel terrible, they're depressed, they can't sleep, and it just exasperates the issue. That's what I'm talking about. And when we get good at mastering this, then we are better role models. You got to identify what gets you off track and when you aren't at your best. And then you've got to determine the steps to stay on track and get back on track. So there you have it. So let's recap. The first thing you got to understand is why programming your mind is important. And hopefully you understand from today's episode that it's really so that you can get clear on what you want and, more importantly, do what you need to do to achieve your goals. You know, this requires that you understand how your brain works. You get really clear on your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, how you're making decisions, and that you understand your mind and you understand that it's your beliefs that dictate a lot of the results you get based on what challenges or opportunities you're faced with. And then last but most certainly not least, and likely most important, is how to quiet and slow down your mind so that you can get really laser focused on what you want and you'll take the necessary steps to achieve your goal. So I hope you enjoyed the first part of this series. If you can dial in how to program your mind, it is going to help you in so many aspects of your life. So I really encourage you to go listen, re-listen, and more importantly, apply what you learned today. I'll look so forward to seeing you next week when we dive into focusing, deciding, your worth barometer, releasing mental blocks and core beliefs, how to program your mind, as well as tips that'll help you, and then the power of 7. Bye for now.